There is an outbreak right now in the US for a parasite that causes diarrhea. We have heard of a lot of other causes of diarrhea, such as viruses, bacteria. Those are the very common things. But this outbreak is new. The vast amount of people being affected by it is new.
What do you do if you are the doctor to have the eureka moment with something and say, you know what, I think we're in an outbreak with Cyclospora. We probably need to alert the nation or the authorities to be on the lookout for that.
Medicine,
Law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Medico-Legal Brief, where medicine meets the law. I'm Lawyer Nik, and as always, I'm accompanied by Dr. Long. Dr. Long, today I want to just ask you some shitty questions, use that pun. Currently, there's a worry throughout the country of this explosive diarrhea that's resulting in ER visits, where we're not supposed to be eating certain produce and we need to make sure we're washing our salads and so on and so forth. We've had a few serious episodes as of late. I wanted to have a little bit of a lighter episode and unfortunately talk about diarrhea. Are you familiar with what's going on? I should ask that first.
I am. What a way to tell the world that, hey, greens are bad for you, right? Because the world doesn't eat enough vegetables already. And we just needed something else to deter the population not to eat healthy. But you're right. There is an outbreak right now in the US for Cyclosporiasis. And it's a parasite that causes diarrhea. We have heard a lot of other etiologies or other causes of diarrhea, such as viruses, bacteria. Those are the very common things. This one's been around for a while, but this outbreak is new. The vast amount of people being affected by it is new. And that's why it's making headlines, because it's so widespread at the moment. And we haven't seen this sort of outbreak in a long time.
And to what you just said, from my understanding, this is something that exists out in the world, and we have seen smaller outbreaks like this occur in the past. We had one in 2013, another one in 2018. Essentially, this is something that has occurred before, but now, as you mentioned, we're just seeing a more serious outbreak across the United States.
Correct. This parasite lives in tropical, subtropical areas, especially in areas that have very poor sanitation. They're usually countries that don't have that infrastructure. And so we see that in those areas all the time. We also do see outbreaks or smaller clusters of this in the US during the spring and summer times, because that's when produce gets imported in. If you're not washing appropriately, then you may find yourself spending your time on the toilet rather than outside. And so these are things that do happen fairly commonly. But again, it's the amount of cases that's really making it exaggerated this summer.
Now, the first thing that concerns people when they hear of an outbreak of any kind, just for the uninformed, the uneducated, is this contagious? Now, by the sounds of it, it's just a more extreme version of food poisoning to where you're not going to pass it on to anybody. Is that completely accurate?
Yes and no. Let's start from the basics. This is a cyclosporiasis. It's caused by a parasite called Cyclospora cayetanensis. And it's basically a coccidian protozoan parasite. It gets transmitted through contaminated food and water, and it is rarely transmitted via person to person. It's not like our more common issues like food poisoning or things like viruses and bacteria. Those can be transmitted person to person, because if you get into contact with stool or people who don't wash their hands after they go to the bathroom, that's how you can transmit viruses and bacteria. This one in particular is usually transmitted by produce, food, and water if it's not clean or sanitized appropriately.
Okay, so essentially we need to make sure first and foremost that we're cleaning our produce, that we're getting our food from legitimate sources, that we're drinking clean water, and just making sure that overall we're being healthy. Not to mention that we just need to be washing our hands for all the other things as well.
Correct. Those are things we hopefully should be doing. But obviously, with kids, people who are not able to or don't have the resources to, maybe they don't have soap and water, maybe they don't have boiling water or a stove, things like that across the country. I know that there are different income levels. We can't paint a broad stroke and say that everyone should be doing this, but the majority of people have access to be able to keep themselves safe from contracting something like this.
Now, I would say that most people in the world have had one form of extreme diarrhea or another. But I'm curious as to what makes this different. Somebody's coming to you and they say, hey, my stomach hurts. My physician years ago referred to it as bubbly guts. He said, oh, you got the bubbly guts, huh? And I just want to know because it feels like diarrhea is a side effect of a lot of different things, whether it's a sickness, whether it's stress, whether it's just eating bad food, or maybe the side effect of a prescription drug. How do you as a doctor place this as a symptom and determine where it's actually coming from?
There's some distinguishing features of this particular diarrhea. It's explosive. You usually have explosive diarrhea, whereas run-of-the-mill like norovirus, rotavirus, some of those you get diarrhea. It's frequent, but it's not necessarily explosive. You're getting to the toilet and you're like throwing out a bomb. That's unique to this particular parasite. The other thing is this parasite causes a cyclical or an intermittent wave that hits you. It's not there all the time, but you'll have a moment in time where you're feeling good, and then all of a sudden it hits you pretty hard again, and then again back to normal, and then you get hit hard again. You may have abdominal cramping, pain, but those are all common symptoms that you would get with any sort of GI bug, whether that's food poisoning, a virus, bacteria that's causing it. You're going to have some of that cramping. Other things, you might have some nausea, you might have some vomiting, you might have some dehydration because you're releasing so much fluids and you're not able to take in as much. Those are common expected things when you're having diarrhea. But the really standout thing is the cyclical nature of it, as well as the explosive diarrhea of it. It doesn't mean that there aren't any other bacteria out there that don't cause explosive diarrhea. But this one in particular is harder to distinguish because when we test for these sort of diarrheas, we don't normally test for this particular parasite. So you have the suspicion of it to then request the testing.
So outside of just feeling crappy, no pun intended, it almost seems like it gives the laxative effect where if you take a laxative, you're literally running to the bathroom and it's quite aggressive, I should say.
Exactly. The majority of healthy young patients who get this parasite are going to have your run of the mill food poisoning type symptoms. It may last a little bit longer. It may seem slightly different in terms of the waxing and waning of it, but you're still going to have the diarrhea, the nausea, loss of appetite, potentially a low grade fever. These are all common effects that you would expect for young and healthy. It's when we start looking into the young children who are not able to voice issues or able to maintain their fluid intake, or the older patients who truly cannot take the chance at losing all this fluid and then being able to replenish it appropriately. They already usually have a poor appetite to begin with. So then now we're dipping into their reserves and they're basically petering out much more quickly than a young person would be.
Now, I want to get back to the Cyclospora here in a second, but traditionally speaking, from a medical standpoint, diarrhea can be deadly. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's not that the diarrhea is causing deaths, it's how your body reacts to it and whether or not you have the appropriate treatment. So, are you replenishing your hydrations, your electrolytes that are being depleted? Are you replenishing them appropriately? That's when you start getting heart issues, you start getting bleeding, start having pain. If those things are not treated appropriately, that's really when you start seeing deaths. It's really for those really high risk patient populations, like the really young, the really old, or the immunocompromised people who have cancer or that are on cancer treatment, people who have HIV that are on medications that suppress their immune system. Those are the ones that are at highest risk to die from this, but it's not because of the parasite itself, it's because of the effects of the diarrhea.
As per usual, even when you're a kiddo and you're feeling sick, either you're throwing up or you have a bellyache, it's let's get some Gatorade into you, some Pedialyte, try to get those electrolytes back, trying to rehydrate you, trying to get you some food and some crackers. It's the same manner of let's just take care of the body itself as it's trying to fight off this impact of diarrhea, essentially.
Yeah. And again, this is not medical advice in any way. Make sure that if you're having any of these signs or symptoms that you go and see your doctor. But the general idea is that you supportively treat your symptoms. If you're having diarrhea for the first 24 hours, you want to make sure you're drinking plenty of water, especially water with electrolytes, and that you're replenishing those things that you're losing. Usually you're losing a lot of potassium, sodium, so Gatorade or Powerade or any of those electrolyte packets tend to have enough of those electrolytes to replenish you. And then if it's something that lasts for several days to even a week to 2 weeks, that's really when I would recommend you go see your family doctor to get tested to see what you have. It could just be E. coli. E. coli is a fairly common bacteria that causes diarrhea. And so some of those can be self-limiting. Some of them need antibiotics. Cyclospora typically is self-limiting, something that you have to live with and let it run its course. Most people will get over it, will recover and do just fine. There's a very small subset of people that need to be hospitalized. And again, it's for the side effects of having the diarrhea, not necessarily to treat the parasite. Those people might need IV hydration, IV fluids. They may need to have some sort of supplemental food source because they're not able to take things orally. And that's usually what we see when it comes to these sort of outbreaks.
I was actually going to ask that. If somebody actually had to go to the ER or an extended stay at the hospital, what does it look like? And it sounds like you go in and you're getting hooked up to the IV and you're just trying to let it pass while making sure you're getting the appropriate nutrients.
Yeah, and I would say the majority of the time, the physicians may watch the diarrhea decrease in frequency. We're not necessarily going to keep you until the diarrhea stops because you have no idea how long it may last. It may last another 1 or 2 weeks, 3 weeks after that. Who knows? It's very different for every person, depending on their immune system, depending on how severe the parasite and the strain that they have is. A lot of things go into play there. But if we are seeing that we've replenished your hydration, we've replenished your electrolytes, everything's looking pretty good, and you look like you're on your up and up and that you can potentially tolerate taking orals at home, we're probably going to send you home from there.
Okay. Now, I have a list here of the produce that are the primary culprits. It says fresh produce such as cilantro, basil, lettuce, raspberries, peas, and salad mixes. And then obviously you had mentioned contaminated drinking water.
Leafy greens, and anything that is vegetables and fruit. This is a funny way for the universe to tell everyone not to eat it or to deter people from eating what is supposed to be healthy. It's unfortunate that it's happening this summer, but those are the common things that we're seeing right now is that it's very hard to clean these produce because you have to really get in the nooks and crannies, and just washing alone is not enough. You have to do a lot of scrubbing. There is some discussion about washing your produce with vinegar, which might help break down the shell or the outer casing of the parasite. But ultimately, most people get stuck with it, deal with it, and move on from there.
A few nights ago, my wife was making an Italian style dinner, and she had gotten our order from H-E-B here in Texas. We love H-E-B. And I look at the countertop and I see basil and rosemary. And I look at her and I say, "Are you aware of the explosive diarrhea thing that's going around?" And she's like, "No, what's going on?" And so I explain it to her and I immediately throw those things into the trash because I'm worried we might get sick. It's stressful when you try to eat healthy and you look at leafy greens or you look at salads. And even with ordering takeout now, I'm wondering, okay, where is the restaurant getting their produce from? With anything in which there's a recall when it comes to food or food contamination, there's always this delay because there's a lot of import export that occurs with getting our food. And so it's just a wonder of, well, where did it come? When did it come? How did it come? You could look at a salad kit and the salad kit could have been made a few weeks ago. Did it happen before the outbreak or is it something that happened after the outbreak? So when is it actually clear for individuals to go back to the normal?
Right. And so the precautions that we're taking are obviously making sure we're washing our hands clean. We're making sure that we're going to reputable places to get our groceries, our fruits and vegetables. The other thing is that when it comes to produce, we're picking choices where there is already an outer shell that we have to then open up ourselves. So the contamination can't really seep through like an orange. If you're going to eat an orange, you have to still peel it. Bananas, things like that, we're not too worried about. But things like berries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, those are a little bit more concerning. Instead, maybe turning into other alternative fruits like watermelons, plums, peaches, those sort of things, because then you at least know you can peel the outer layer to help decrease the risk. When it comes to vegetables, it's a little bit harder because you can't be sure enough to clean it appropriately. However, the nice thing about this is if you cook it well enough, if you fry it, you steam it, you make sure that the heat gets high enough to kill off this parasite, then you can be safe to eat your vegetables. And so if you're eating it at a restaurant, I would make sure that it's not like a fresh lettuce that they're peeling and that you're eating. Instead, I would make sure that they cook it appropriately so that no matter where they got it, at least it's killing off the bacteria, the virus, and the parasite.
Now, has anybody actually come into your office with this?
I have not had anyone yet. However, there is one particular patient that did come to me, I want to say 3 or 4 months ago, that they did have diarrhea for about 2 to 3 weeks. They came in, we did their typical testing. It all came back negative. And now I'm wondering, did I miss asking and requesting this particular test that we have to test for? Because even if you do stool testing PCR, if you do regular stool testing for ova and parasites, that does not show up. This cyclospora does not show up in that testing as a positive. You have to specifically request it. And so I did not think of it at that time. It's not something that was on my radar. Now it makes me wonder if I should go reach back out to that patient and see if they're still having diarrhea. Because if they are, we should probably test for it.
We talk a lot about COVID on this podcast because we all had to live through it. It's similar to that, where when COVID was happening, before people really knew what COVID was, you just got sick and you really didn't know what it was from. And then all of a sudden it was like light bulbs. Maybe that's what that person had. Does that ever carry with you as a physician where something comes out months later and then you think back to a patient or a certain sect of patients and you say, well, I missed that. If I would have known then what I know now, my treatment plan, my approach would have been vastly different. Does that ever hold with you as a doctor?
Always. We're not perfect. We're all human. I know I don't know everything. That's why when I partner with my patients and we have a discussion on how we're going to manage this, what our plan is, and trying to figure out what's going on, it's always a discussion and we always lay out the plan and we choose together. It's not something that I'm deciding for the patient. They make it together so that whatever happens, whether we find the answer or not, that we are understanding that there are things that can be missed, but at least we're exploring every avenue that they're willing to explore. For this patient, I told them we exhausted everything that is common. There are things that we could do further, like a colonoscopy to go in and make sure that there's not like a new Crohn's or ulcerative colitis that could be going on. And they opted not to do that. So yes, it gives me pause thinking back that, hey, maybe I missed a diagnosis. However, I also think back to the conversation I had with them and said, hey, we exhausted everything that we would commonly test for. However, there are things that we could be missing. And to test or to treat and find that answer, we have to do this. And he opted not to. I put the ball back into his court and he decided that. And so I can live with that. I feel comfortable with that. But that's why I'm always constantly double checking, triple checking myself. I'm always reading up on new data, on new research, keeping up with current events. I actually personally keep a list of those hard cases, cases where I never truly found an answer because I always want to just refer back and see maybe someone else out there, whether it was a specialist or another doctor, reviewed the case and found the answer. And maybe I can learn from that. Or maybe they still haven't found an answer. Maybe I now have thought of a better plan and then reach out to them and say, hey, let's try this now.
I'm kind of going off on a tangent. What do you do if you are the doctor to have the eureka moment with something and say, I think we're in an outbreak with Cyclospora. We probably need to alert the nation or the authorities to be on the lookout for that. What happens when you have, oddly, patient zero in this case as a physician?
There are actually protocols for that. You let your direct administrator know, your clinic manager, who then will escalate it up to the higher ups in the administration, the CEO. And then you also report it to your local health department, who will then potentially tell the CDC or the infectious disease department. There's protocols in place locally, and then that web will then tell their higher ups from there. You are the ground zero. Yes, you're the doctor taking care of patient zero, but it's not like you have to go out and do all this legwork to let everyone else know. You just have to let the right people know, who will then let more right people know, who will then spread it out appropriately.
Okay. I think about that in terms of the law, where a lawyer could take on a case and it could have some nuanced constitutional aspect or maybe a civil rights aspect or just something that the courts haven't thought of. And before you know it, that case can go on for years and years and years and get elevated to the appellate level and ultimately the Supreme Court. And you, as an attorney who never thought that you'd have a case before the Supreme Court, then has a case in front of the Supreme Court that results in this case law that gets established just because you took on the case.
It's definitely an interesting time, especially with all the political changes and health changes that we're seeing into the system that this outbreak is going on. And it's always interesting. I mean, in our lifetime already, we've gone through COVID and now we're having measles outbreaks and now we're dealing with this cyclospora that usually is not this big of a deal. And it is. It's just an interesting time to be living and dealing with all of this together.
Now, do you think, and I have my own opinions about this, but do you think when we see outbreaks like this or outbreaks like COVID or measles or Ebola, that it is a matter of they've always existed, but we just didn't have the access to information and the access to media? Or it really is something that's of concern in this day and age and that we are just more aware that it's happening?
It's a mix. One, the ability to spread information is a lot quicker and easier nowadays. So obviously, a lot of people are going to find out quicker. There's also an evolution chart that we were looking at. Humans evolve, parasites evolve, viruses, bacteria evolve. They get stronger if we don't kill them appropriately. And that's why antibiotic stewardship is very important, because we don't want to be throwing antibiotics to every single patient, because then we're going to be developing these really super bacteria that we will not be able to treat down the line. Same goes with these sort of things, is that if we are not appropriately treating or not appropriately monitoring, then yes, they can go under the radar until they become a big deal. The other thing is there are always new things coming out, just like COVID. Yes, we knew what COVID was, but that particular strain was new. Same idea with any other cause like parasites and viruses and bacteria, is that there can always be a new strain that suddenly pops up and then cause havoc through the country and through the world.
Which is terrifying. It definitely is a little scary.
Oh yeah, that would be the easiest way to just turn the world on its head. And I mean, it did. COVID, everyone was on lockdown, and it was crazy, and it has caused a lot of ripple effects even now, 6 years after it all started.
Yeah, to transition a little bit, because I know that obviously we bring in the legal. I was very curious as to whether or not there have been any lawsuits because of something like the Cyclospora outbreak. And some of the ones I found were pretty interesting. I want to get your opinion of it. I'll read these notable examples. But in 2013, there was an outbreak in Nebraska and Iowa. And this actually took place with Olive Garden and Red Lobster. And it was hundreds of people became ill after eating salads that were linked to the contaminated produce. The parent company, which is Darden Restaurants, were sued, so personal injury lawsuits, many of which were resolved via settlements. Then in 2018, McDonald's had a salad outbreak. 500 people in multiple states became ill after eating the salads that were contaminated. Numerous customers filed lawsuits alleging negligence and product liability. McDonald's stopped selling the affected salads during the investigation, and again, many claims were settled privately. And then in 2020, Fresh Express bagged salad outbreak. A multi-state outbreak linked to bagged salad mixes resulted in lawsuits against Fresh Express and other entities in the supply chain alleging contaminated products caused illness. In looking at this, there's a lot of civil liability. People are claiming injury, ending up in the hospital or ending up with medical bills, and then trying to hunt down the culprit, whether that's somebody in the supply chain, whether that's the restaurant. When you look at these items, history starts repeating itself to where if you can pinpoint where the outbreak is coming from or where people are getting their produce, then you could start suing people. And then it becomes national news that one of those chains is getting people sick.
I'm not surprised. You laying it out there is more of a shock, like the fact that it happens so often, so frequently, because that's just what's revolved around salads and these outbreaks. But there are other types of outbreaks out there that we're not talking about. It happens more commonly than we realize. It's that we don't focus in on it. And so it's just making headlines now. And so we're focusing on it right now. It's ever changing, and it will be interesting to see how this resolves and whether or not it will be resolved fully. I'm sure that we're going to continue to have small issues down the line in small spurts, depending on the time of year and the handling of the foods.
Yeah, with any of this, I just always wonder, when does it end from an FDA perspective, from a CDC perspective? When do they give the all clear and say, all right, guys can go back to eating raspberries? It's just interesting to me because we live in such a global economy where it really is import export. And if just one country is impacted or one region is impacted, it's kind of like everybody's impacted in this day and age. So I'm just curious as to when that stops.
Obviously, they're going to have to follow the trends and the rate of exposures and new cases. Once the new cases start to slow down, then they kind of know. Hopefully, we can expect that maybe closer to fall, winter time, when people eat less of these sort of items, these sort of produce, that there should be a drop in cases.
So do you think that, given the nature of summer and what summer brings and fresh salads and fresh fruit, that we're probably going to continue to see a uptick over the next couple months until we hit Q3, Q4 this year?
Because of social media and because of how the news is spread, I don't necessarily think we're going to see an uptick. It's going to level out because people are talking about it. People are seeing it. People are hearing about it, and they're taking precautions to avoid it.
Which ends up impacting the economy, because then certain supply chains, certain companies are not getting our dollar for the food that they sell, and grocery stores lose money. And then if grocery stores lose money, they can't afford to pay their employees. And it's a bigger impact than I think people realize. They just say, oh, I don't want explosive diarrhea, but there's so many other people and companies and institutions that are affected by something like this that it really is something that is of concern.
I'm just happy it's not another respiratory illness because, again, it's hard to tell people to stay inside, not talk, not breathe, whereas this is something that they put in their mouths. And it's already something that most people don't want to eat anyway. So I don't think it's too hard to tell people, hey, let's take it easy on the produce for now. I'm glad we talked about it. I hope that our viewers find some knowledge or some information that is helpful so that they can avoid it. But we really appreciate everyone checking in on this episode with Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. It's always a pleasure, but please make sure you follow us on social medias. Make sure you check in on us again. We always post on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Central Time. We'll see you again next week.
Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.